This episode is sponsored by Atomic Mass Games. Episode 58 of the Board Game Geek podcast, where we geek out about board games, the mechanisms behind them, and the people who create them. I'm your host, Candace Harris, and I am super stoked to be here today with Alex from the BoardGameCo YouTube channel. How's everything going with you today, Alex?
Oh my gosh, it's been a month, but it's always been a month, but it's good. I'm getting an opportunity to play a lot of games. Right now, crowdfunding season has slowed down just a tad, which means I'm able to focus a bit more on some of the things that I want to actively table as opposed to things that have actual deadlines attached to them.
Yeah.
And that's been good. That's been good.
Awesome. And were you at PAX Unplugged?
Yes.
Okay. I miss seeing so many people there.
You and me both. The amount of people at post-convention that I saw online, I was like, I feel like I ran into like a good 10, 15 people who I'm like close friends with, like to see and all that. And then after the convention, I was like, you were there, and you were there, and you were there.
You were there, and you were there. Yeah, that's exactly how it was for me too. But I don't know if you have any like highlights from PAX Unplugged.
A specific highlight. So PAX Unplugged, I had a good time. PAX Unplugged is one of my favorite conventions because it's a good mix of things that keep you involved and invested, but also not so overwhelming like Gen Con can be. And so I got to play a lot of games, got to demo a few things. I got to try out YRO from Play to Z. That was a fun little game. I got to not get my hands on the Lord of the Rings trick-taking game, despite trying to very hard.
I got lucky.
Yeah,
I came home with one. Yeah,
I'm gonna get one eventually, just not right now at least. But it was a good convention. It was relaxing. Very, what's the word for it? Refreshing. Life-giving. Whatever words you use, but good stuff.
All that stuff. Yeah, totally. And I was happy that it didn't rain this year because I don't know. There's nothing like worse than rain when it's cold like that in Philly. Yep. But yeah, it was cool for me. I use it also as an opportunity to visit family because I'm from the Philadelphia area.
Nice.
Suburbs just outside. And so I visited my family and my partner Matt's family for just a little bit beforehand. And that was fun because, I brought games. I got my whole family playing Deep Sea Adventure.
Nice, good one, yeah.
Yeah, and some of my friends who aren't like board gamers, and they're just like, midway through, like taking pictures like, oh, I want to buy this. So hopefully games are trickling into new households, new games and everything. So I had some like fun family moments, but besides getting the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game, I was really, really stoked about that. But I got a sneak peek at Great Western Trail El Paso.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm like so pumped about that. Great Western Trail is just like one of my favorite games. And the fact that there's this like new streamlined version coming where you can play it in like, I don't know, an hour. And it's like really from, the couple of demo rounds I played, really, really awesome. So I am pumped for that.
Yeah, my two favorite from the Asmodee meeting were, I saw El Paso, I didn't get to table it, but I actually managed to come home with Azul Duel, which I was very happy about.
Ooh, nice.
And then the other one I was very intrigued by, I got to play it, didn't really get to play, I got to see the flow, was Crafting the Cosmos, also from Off-Stocks.
Yeah, same thing. Like that game looks so cool. And if anybody wants to see what I'm talking about, I did put out a PAX Unplugged recap video on the BGG YouTube channel. I'll link it in the notes. But I didn't fully get how it works, but it was just so intriguing. I love the colors. And I think those two designers, like David Gordon and Tam, are like, they're doing some really innovative stuff. So I'm very curious to play that one.
Yeah, I got strong Calico vibes in the sense that you're trying to fulfill multiple objectives at the same time based on shared, like, aligned placements. And it's just like had a lot going on. It looked very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, like, to your point of PAX Unplugged being like a great convention, one of the things I love about it, is like the fact that the way they split the like expo hall where you can demo games and buy games, and then you have a huge open gaming area where you can like just go check something out, buy it immediately, and then go play it with your friends or family. And the other thing that I like really love about PAX Unplugged, this was my 3rd year going, is it feels so diverse. I don't think there's another board game convention where I've seen so many people of color there.
Nice.
Yeah, and I noticed that in Philly, and it makes me smile. Like it's cool, and it seems like also that PAX Unplugged is like its own world. Like sure, there's a lot of overlap of people who go to that convention and also go to Gen Con, but it seems like it's just like kind of built very organically, where it's like there are just gamers in the Philadelphia area, and they found out about this convention, and then they went one year, and then they told friends to go, and it kind of like it feels like it's like a untapped audience or something, but like it grows and grows every year.
It's sold out completely this year.
Yeah. And of course, my mom was like watching on the news and was just like blown away when she said like people were like scalping tickets and whatnot. She's like, I didn't know it was like that big of a deal. And I'm like, yes. It's
good.
Really
it's
cool.
grown very quickly, very fast over the past several years, and I'm happy for them.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Alex, and I think we've talked about this when I first met you, but one of the most significant rabbit holes I've jumped down this year, besides my obsession with Attack on Titan, is adventure games. And often when I'm like looking on YouTube and I'm checking out different adventure games, I always like end up finding your videos. So I know you and I have some overlap in our tastes in general. So today we're exploring the wonderful world of adventure games together. And Alex, I consider myself to have minimal experience playing adventure games, but I have maximum curiosity. So that's where you're going to come in.
So what was the thing that led you down this rabbit hole? What game did you play that made you realize this might be intriguing to you?
I have played Too Many Bones, and that like when I originally got into Too Many Bones, it did not seem like a thing that I would have any interest in, and I loved it. But that wasn't the catalyst. Like it was, I'm pretty sure earlier this year, I finally tried Mini Rogue.
Nice.
And yeah, I had a review copy of Mini Rogue that was sitting on my shelf for a while. And one day I had some solo time and I played that, and I might have then gone to look at videos, and then I think I discovered the Dungeon Dive channel, and then I started looking at all these other games, and I'm like, I want to play these. So I think it was Mini Rogue that like kind of pushed me down the rabbit hole this year with adventure games.
Very good. I remember like it's funny because like CMON is a company that's very often associated with these big box miniature games. I remember when I first got into the hobby, I focused much more on Euro games to a large extent, and then area control was also familiar. Like things that were risk adjacent felt very familiar. But for a long time, I had that attitude of like, who wants these boxes full of miniatures? Like, why don't you just plant crops like a normal adult? And I don't know what it was, but eventually I tried out Zombicide Black Plague. Eventually, like years after Zombicide came out, and then that was my foray into like, oh, there's something fun sometimes about moving into this more D&D RPG kind of genre. You're like, oh, it turns out, it wasn't just crops that was fun. It's also sometimes slaughtering hordes of enemies.
Totally. But before we dive into our adventure game discussion, I'd love to hear what you've been playing lately, Alex. So let's jump into fresh plays.
So I have two that I'll be covering today. One actually leaning into our adventure game genre, and one that is not. One is more into the Euro, because I'm a little bit of an omnigamer. I appreciate a lot of different categories, and both these games have been, sparking joy for me.
Okay.
I'll start with the adventure one, and then we'll come around after later. But for the adventure one, a game that I've thoroughly been enjoying, it's set up right next to me right now, is Arydia, The Paths We Dare Tread. This is a game coming to you from Far Off Games, designed by Cody Miller, came out, now. It's like it's delivering pretty much now. Lots of people like I have an early production copy, a pre-production copy, but people will be getting their copies soon. And it's got all the adventure-y goodness. It's basically the way I would describe this game is it leans very strongly into like almost an RPG into a box, because adventure games, we'll talk more about the category where they go, but later. But this one, it has the choose your own adventure aspect. Your characters, you're wandering around this overland map, and then at different points you're kind of diving a little bit deeper down into like an actual setting. So you travel from village to village or to this guild or whatever it is. But then you have this individual setting, and it very much feels like a video game in the way it's presented, where you could have characters that might wander into a bar, and you can choose to talk to the person behind the counter, or you could choose to walk past them. And depending on what you do, it might unlock different discoveries or encounters. You might decide to wander around to the back of the house and see at the other side this child playing in the river, and then have an interaction with them. And depending on the interaction, you'll have different options unlock. Sometimes you'll be forced to have certain encounters because that's how you progress to the next area. Other times not. Other times, if you don't have that dialogue tree, you'll never find out that there was actually something in the river that the child was searching for, and that's why you should have talked to him. And so it has that video game vibe. But then after that second level, because this is an overland map, there's a second level where you're kind of engaging with characters. And then the third level, which kind of interacts seamlessly with the second level, is when it suddenly turns into the actual enemies. Whatever that situation might be. But
Yeah.
You're talking to this lady, and she mentions her stores are being raided, and before you know it, there's a bunch of rats around you that you now have to fight off and destroy.
Oh,
But like a
snap.
lot of the time, the thing that's interesting is a lot of adventure games kind of have like just full on combat mode the whole time. This doesn't. Very often you're in a nice peaceful adventure mode setting, but then as soon as the enemies appear, the switch toggles. You're now in combat, and now you have to go ahead and kill all these rats before you can go back to the old lady and tell her that you've taken care of her problem. But I'm really enjoying the sheer level of RPG adventure that it manages to encapsulate in the multiple tiers that it approaches the genre from, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. Arydia, the Path Sweeter Tread.
That sounds so familiar. I'll have to look it up and see, because I must have heard something about this one. It definitely gives me video game vibes because Matt has been getting into this game called Star Wars Outlaws on Xbox, and it has a lot of like, hey, you're going into little cantinas and talking to people, and then now we're in like combat mode because we stumbled upon stormtroopers or whatever. But that sounds really cool. Is it a campaign game, and is it how long does each session take?
So it's a campaign game. The sessions are kind of, I guess the way I phrase it is, there are parts that would be very awkward to try to stop and save your progress, and there's parts that are very natural because you have, in fact, I can even just show it to you, like over here. I need to be careful, like I'm gonna keep it at a distance, a spoiler minimal, but like this is your overland map over here, so like you kind of have these areas that as you discover them, you can flip around and punch things out. But when you're not engaging in the overland map, as soon as you're done with any individual area that you're in, it's a very natural way to just save the game because you'd have to anyways take out new tiles. So there's lots of natural save points to the game. So it's session kind of dependent. You can set it up and play it for 5 hours. You can set up and play it for 45 minutes at a time. I believe the total arc is supposed to be in the 50-hour range.
Okay. Are you playing it solo?
No, I'm playing this one 2-player.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
It is soloable, but you do lose a little bit of the RPG interactions because the way the cards are structured is when you have an interaction, one character sits there and says like, oh yeah, there's a thing going on in yon village and the guild asked me to handle this and the rat's in the corner. But then what you're supposed to do is you hear the things I say and you can choose what to ask me. Like, you're like, what do you mean the guild? What do you mean the rats? So you could actually look at the cards and just do it that way, or you can kind of lean into the thematic RPG.
That's cool.
And that you need 2 players for.
That's cool. Awesome. Well, I am also an Omni gamer, and one of the style of board games that I am super into is card games, like these 1v1 kind of card dueling games. I just love them. I have so many that I still need to play, but because I had a media badge for PAX Unplugged, as I'm sure you probably did, you get a bunch of emails from different publishers like, hey, let me know if you want to interview this person or check this thing out. And I got this email about a game called React: The Arts of War that I never heard of, but it was, I think, pitched in the email as a 1v1 like grid-based combat game with highly asymmetric characters. And I was like, ooh, all of that stuff sounds good. So I kind of like scheduled a meeting, checked it out, and I didn't have any kind of expectations, but I was like really intrigued by the 10-minute or 15-minute demo of this game. So they ended up providing me a review copy of the like retail version of the game, but they also hooked me up with the acrylic standees, which you can get with the deluxe version or buy them separately. And I went over to the booth to pick up the game because they were doing the meetings one other place. And I ended up spending like $80 buying 4 different playmats because I couldn't decide on just 2 because they're all character based. I haven't played any of these characters, but I was like, oh, that looks cool. That looks cool. Oh, I want to have options. So anyway, I ended up buying the playmats. And I got an opportunity to play this at PAX Unplugged the day before I flew out, or the day I was flying out with my friend Kayla in my hotel lobby. And it's so cool. So I have been just like, this game has been on my mind since then. And I'm just like, I want to play all the different characters, but like they definitely take some figuring out. Like you need to play each one multiple times. But anyways, so this is like a 1v1 grid-based card dueling game about these different artists, and they're kind of anime inspired, but they're all uniquely created. So you have like a tattooist, you have a sculptor, a painter, an animator, and every character, the way they play is very thematic to what their art style is. Like, for example, like the sculptor can drop these different little clay tokens around and eventually use those to summon a big like clay monster mini
cool.
thing. Yeah. It's really cool. And then you have like the tagger. The tagger is like jumping around and uses these murals, like graffiti murals, to do stuff. So it's like his whole thing is like he's got to place these murals different places and then activate them, and he can manipulate the other player and do all sorts of cool stuff. Then you have like the animator who doesn't have a deck of cards, just has these like frames tokens. Like you're basically dropping these different frames out and you're interacting with the frames in almost like an action programming sense. And oh my gosh, the tattooist has these bunnies and like she doesn't care about being hurt, but she has to protect her bunnies, and you're trying to position these. Yeah, it's really, really, really cool if you like asymmetric gameplay and card dueling. But the main flow of the game is you're going to be playing cards into what they call the react chain, because it's called React: The Arts of War. And basically, this is a 5 slots for cards numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first slot, whoever the active player is, can play an intention card. So you have 2 different types of cards, intentions and reactions. And then it would pass to you. You could play a reaction. And then it goes back to me, whether you play a reaction or not. And I could play a reaction. And we can go back and forth till we both pass, or till this react chain fills up to 5 cards. And then we resolve the cards backwards to front.
That's fun.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure they were inspired by, I think he said Yu-Gi-Oh! And something with Magic: The Gathering, in terms of like the way the chain stacks. Yeah. So it's really, really cool. And like it breaks your brain for a second, almost like if you've ever played Far Away, like the whole going backwards, because it's like I could do something like playing certain cards. You have to target a zone, an area on the board, or sometimes you have to pick a direction. But it's like depending on how our reactions go, things might not go exactly as planned. And yeah, it's just, I'm finding it really, really interesting. And the goal is just to damage your opponent 3 times. There are other things with this, but like what really hooked me in was at the demo, they had this one character, which is an extra like expansion character that's a DJ. and she is literally her summons. So you have the artist standee and then the summons, and she has to position her speakers to like do damage to wherever the intersection is of those. That's where she can deal damage. And she had cards like Electric Slide and all. Like I again, this game is like super cool. Right now, I've played 3 different characters. I played the tattooist, the artist, and the animator. I want to just play the same character over and over, but I also want to like explore the other ones. So it's this hard thing, but I'm just like loving it. And playing with my friend Steven the other night, he was like he was like his heart was beating, as we're like deciding like, oh, how am I gonna react to that or not? And so, anyways, I am just like really like pumped about this game, and I ended up, I don't remember if I said this or not, but I ended up ordering the deluxe version too.
That's great. Don't know much about it. I've seen the booth at conventions in the past, but like it's never really entered into like any other buzz that I've seen, and so I've never made the time to hunt it down. But this might change that.
It is definitely worth checking out. Like I think it's unique, very thematic. But again, the factions are highly asymmetric. So every time I teach someone, I give them the tagger because that's who I played first, and he's one of the least complex. And then the other cool thing about this game is that the base game, the retail version, comes with 8 different characters. 8 different characters, and they all have their own tuck boxes where you can put all their cards and like little tokens, and each character has like a reference sheet that tells you about their play style. There's a card that you can hand to who you're playing against that says facing off against this character, so that your opponent, if they're like lots of cool stuff like that. And on the back of all the tuck boxes, there's a little bit of like lore about the character, and then there's also complexity, difficulty, and some other fun thematic stat. But yeah, this game just kind of snuck on my radar. I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm just really excited to keep playing it. And you should definitely try it. You should definitely, and it's got like a Summoner Wars kind of thing with the, card play and moving people around on a board. But it's called React: The Arts of War.
Very cool. So my second game is leaning into that Euro category. This is actually one of my, I hesitate to call it one of my favorite Euros because I want more plays in my belt before I say that. But I will say it was one of my most anticipated games. I had a chance to play the prototype back when it was in prototype form 2 years ago, and I've been waiting for it ever since. And I got to table it this past Monday night and loved it. Like it was everything I remembered.
This is killing me, Alex.
Everything I remembered and then some. This is Unconscious Mind from Fantasia Games.
Ooh.
So I don't know where you are in the Euro spectrum, what you do and don't like. For me, this hits every single box that I enjoy. Again, I do want more plays in my belt. I played it, I don't know, 3-4 times when I was covering it way back in the day, and I got one play of the final copy. They have made some changes to it. I plan on diving in the next week or so to the expansion content and getting a feel for the expansions and all that. But this is basically his Unconscious Mind. There's several designers attached to it, from Johnny Pack, Yoma, and to Antonio Zax, Laskas. It's from Fantasia Games, 2024 release, just delivered. Clearly, both my games are in the cult of the new right now, but that's where it is.
That's great. I love hearing about them.
This is also one of the things fascinating about this game is it deals with the thematic it deals with therapy, kind of therapy, not really therapy, but like the
psychology.
There we go. Thank you. Psychology, the psychosis. And one of the things I love about it is there's 2 different illustrators in the game. You have Vincent Dutrait is the main illustrator for the main components, but then Andrew Bosley illustrates all the dreams. So there's like a separation between the dreams that are being illustrated and everything else, which is a fun little twist. But the game itself is basically combo chaining goodness. It's a action place. It's a worker placement at its core, where you have these, I don't even know the tokens, but there's these tokens that are the workers, so to speak, and you place them on the shared board and then point them and orient them in different directions. But depending on the row that you go to, it involves you moving your ink marker around your personal board, and that's important because where your ink marker lands is going to trigger a row or sometimes a column of things that you have to add to your board as you go. So your first action in the game is basically taking a standard worker placement action. You put a thing down. down, you do some stuff. But then as you start adding tokens to your personal board, your working actions start cascading, because now whenever you take an action, you're also moving your ink and then activating all these other bonuses. And the
Cool.
concept here, there's lots of therapy terms in place to, like, about all different components. They try to be incredibly thematic as far as the game goes, but ultimately there's a few things you're trying to do. I'd say the two biggest things you're trying to be mindful of, or let's say three biggest things you're trying to be mindful of, is publishing your scholarly journals. So one of the things you're going to be doing is gathering cards that'll give you in-game benefits, and then you can go ahead and publish those to get points. You're also going to be trying to heal patients, which thematically seems like it's the focus, but practically speaking, you can play an entire game and only heal 1 or 2 patients if you want, and it's still
Gotcha.
viable as a strategy, which I appreciate as viable, because it leads into like this aspect of you're not just about healing patients, it's about the adding to the field, helping others, growing everything. And the last is a shared board where Freud and your characters are moving around this board and then activating various other areas and trying to get influence. Again, these kind of represents the various schools of thought or whatnot. So in all ways, you're either healing patients or contributing to the general knowledge of the field. But the reason I appreciate it so much is that every single action you do just has cascading effects as far as how it impacts what's going on. And it makes you feel progressively more powerful as you go. It makes you feel like there's always so many things you're trying to do. It's interactive enough that you're mindful of the other players while being very much about your own board in a way that I think you have to want to be mindful of this game. I'd recommend at 2 or 3 players before you dive in at 4. I think you want to play with
Gotcha.
people who really know what's going on before you do a full 4-player game, because you can have turns that for the player are incredibly satisfying as you combo from this to this to this to this. But if you're
The
if you have someone else at
downtime.
the table, yes, downtime can be a problem until players know what they're
Gotcha.
doing. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I'm looking forward to my next play.
I think this game looks gorgeous. I remember seeing it at Essen, whatever the first year they had it for demo. And I have definitely been intrigued by it. I know like Steph, Hodge, and Michael were playing it the last day of BGG Con, and I was like, oh, I would love to sit down, but I had to like run to dinner or something. But it looks gorgeous, and I definitely want to try it. And I'm kind of all over the place with my Euro spectrum, but I tend to like medium and heavy Euros. I love when they're thematic, and I love unique themes. So like everything about this game kind of speaks to me, and I need to play it. So I'm glad
Give it
you
a
brought
shot.
it up. Cool. That's Unconscious Mind. And I'm going back to Cult of the Old here. In 2022, I was super hype about a game. It was like shortly after I got into like playing TI4. And, TI4 takes all day usually, unless you're like one of those magical groups that can like bang out a game in like 4 or 5 hours, which seems,
For
I can't
TI4
even
being
imagine.
vicious.
Yeah. But I know people do it. I know people can do it. But I found out about an older game called Star Trek Ascendancy. And this is a game that came out in 2016, designed by Aaron Dill, John Kowalski, and Sean Swigert. And it's from Gale Force 9. And I don't watch Star Trek at all. I keep trying to like get into it because I would like to like know the lore more. But I mainly was excited about this game because it was pitched as the cool 4X game that can be played in like 3 hours. And the base game itself is 3 players, but they have a ton of different expansions where you can play with more players. I don't know what the max is, but I don't even know how that would work because we played with 3. There were 3 of us, and it took up my entire table by the time we finished. So this is, again, a 4X like sci-fi game, Star Trek. I think people who like Star Trek will feel that theme. I was the Vulcans? No, I was Romulus. We had Vulcans and we had Federation. And each faction is slightly asymmetric, like not like React, the card game asymmetric, but they are asymmetric. They have some special abilities and function slightly differently, but you're basically it's almost like a streamlined TI4 experience with, I think, better exploration because you're going to be building the map as you play. You just start with these circular, like your home planets, and they're kind of spread out. And then when you go to like move and explore, you're going to draw a random system tile, I'll say, these circular tiles. And you also, there's this thing with these different lanes. So you have to like roll a die to see they have these different lanes that connect the systems, and they're either 2 spaces, 3 spaces, or 4 spaces. So you're kind of building this like organic map as you play, and you're not initially connected in contact with other factions, but gradually you do. And that's a thing, because then you can get to each other and do stuff like trading. But you're trying to discover different planets so that you can build research nodes, and research nodes generate different resource nodes. Because there are 3 different types of resource nodes that generate resources that you need for like building ships, for like leveling up your tech and everything like that, and also for getting culture. And culture is one of the most important things, because one of the ways you win the game is by collecting 5 Ascendancy tokens. And everybody starts with 1. You need to collect 4 more. And the way you do that is by spending 5 culture. So you want to try to like be building up your culture engine. Although if you're the Klingons, you're a little more militaristic. So maybe you want to try to just take over the other players' home systems. And that's another way you can win. But I had been I was like so excited for this game, got it in 2022, got multiple expansions, never got it to the table until last weekend. And it took a while to play because we were all new. And I think we made some like newbie mistakes, and we were all like still kind of like learning and everything. But the exploration is really cool, because when you flip one of those system tiles, it might be a planet or it might be a phenomenon. And when it's a planet, you're going to draw a card, an exploration card, and kind of like see what you discovered. It could be like civilizations. It could be a crisis that you're running into. And there's like a huge deck of cards so I really, really loved that exploration versus something like TI. It definitely doesn't have as much of the cool, like the agenda phase kind of thing. And the trade agreements you can give to other players. That was okay. But this, as a 3-player game, it was very tense, especially when we connected. We all turtled a little bit, and, nobody wanted to be the first one to strike. I think it would be better with 4 if you can fit it on the table. But I know they're making they have a new version coming out, which might have been crowdfunded, like that has everything.
So I don't believe that. I only loosely know about this game. I know the game's existence. I never tabled it, but I do know that the Gale Force 9 announced that they're doing a giant campaign for
the
all
final
the content.
Frontier. Yeah,
exactly. And it's haven't even had the crowdfunding campaign yet, let alone deliver. But I know that something is coming.
Something is coming, and I think there are going to be rules tweaks and streamlining. So everything I'm saying might be slightly different, but if you're a Star Trek fan and you like 4X games, I think this is going to be a cool one for you to check out. If you're looking for, a 4X game that plays in like 3 hours or so, this is, again, a cool one with asymmetric factions. And I dug it. We definitely got into a situation where it was like, I was in a position of like, oh, I don't think I can win. And, that like that 3-player, but I don't want to help you or you. And so, but again, I think that was partially because of some of the choices we made as newbies.
Yeah, it's also always the cost of 4X is long game sessions that can potentially have those end game situations happen.
Yeah, where everybody could possibly win and is like this tug of war. Yep, exactly. But it was cool. So that's Star Trek Ascendancy, finally playing a game I had since 2022. And I was hype about it. Like, I cannot believe it took me this long to finally try it.
Yeah, recently I tabled Clans of Caledonia that I've had in my collection for like 5 years, and I had that feeling. Like, why? Yeah. Why didn't I play this until now?
Yeah. And then I just wanted to briefly mention one little bonus mention, just because it's something I played for the first time last night. And I think it's like, if people are still looking for holiday ideas, gift ideas, there's a game called A Gentle Rain by Kevin Wilson, 2021. It's a solo game, but you can play it cooperatively. It's by Incredible Dream Studios, and it's super chill. It's like pitched as this 15-minute, like meditative, relaxing game. And even in the rule book, like I think the first rule is like, put on some comfy clothes and, put some soft music on, take a deep breath, So it's really cool, but it's a tile placement game that's very chill, where you're trying to build up this lake by matching these different flowers. And when you close off an area, you get to put a blossom token, I think, like a lily blossom token in there. And you're trying to like get all 8 of those out if you can.
In as few tiles left as possible.
Yes, with as few tiles left as possible. I was not successful. I only got 4 out when I ran out of tiles. But I was just like, this is very... I like that this game exists. And I could see totally playing it with like 2 players, like just having a cup of coffee, and you want something chill, but it's like a little puzzly. So I just want to mention that game because, and I also want to shout out Azure Death solo board gaming channel, because that's a YouTube channel I discovered sometime this year that I really like for people interested in solo games. And
Nice.
He had this on the list, and that's what put it on my radar. So
Yeah, my daughter loves that one. We've enjoyed playing it. It's fun, and then when you finally do beat it for the first time, then you have a little kid who's telling you, "Oh yeah, but I did it in fewer tiles." And yeah.
Fun. And now a word from our sponsor. Miniatures games from your favorite worlds with Atomic Mass Games. Build and paint characters from across the galaxy or from the streets of New York with games like Star Wars Shatterpoint, Star Wars Legion, and Marvel Crisis Protocol. With easy-to-build miniatures, accessible rules, and exciting gameplay, take your game night to the next level with Atomic Mass Games. Collect, assemble, and paint your favorite characters and pit them against one another in epic battles with exciting scenarios, thematic encounters, and intense duels. Pick up a core box at your local game store to start your journey with tabletop miniatures games. With battles in the Marvel Universe or missions in the Star Wars galaxy, Atomic Mass Games has the game for you. Preview rules, characters, and more on the Atomic Mass Games website, and visit your local game store to pick up your own core set and begin your adventure today. Let's talk about adventure games. Alex, I want to say I think you have a lot more experience than me playing adventure games. How would you describe them?
Okay, so adventure games, it's a good question because it depends on where we're going with this. But having talked with you a little about the topic or the hobby, there's so many ways to, I guess, think about them or categorize them. But for me, adventure games there's the literal adventure game, which is actually a much smaller genre and category. Based on the conversations we've had, I'd actually say that there's 3 larger categories of what I think of as adventure games, of that sense of adventure, that feeling of, I don't know, going out and doing stuff, hunting things, killing things, or not necessarily even doing so. In fact, one of the games I'm going to be talking about today is very much not in any of that. It's very much about exploring and almost science-based. It's adventure. So the way I kind of mentally categorize these into 3 large buckets. The first is going to be boss battlers. Boss battlers are where you're in some way, shape, and form, you're going out and you're trying to hunt these large creatures, usually as a team in some way, shape, or form. And many games will fall into a hybrid of these categories, but boss battlers is definitely one area where it's about that overwhelming force that you have to work together to take down. Although working together could be solo, multi-handing different classes. The second category for me would be dungeon crawlers. Dungeon crawlers and again, you'll sometimes have hybrids, but dungeon crawlers are going to be very focused on that sense of generally exploration. I don't think it's necessarily required, but generally you'll have exploration to a large degree, where in some way you're flipping over tiles, you're going through a map, you're going through these things, and you're facing off against foes, usually a lot of smaller foes with occasional mini-boss type foes, but less focused on the boss battling experience. Although again, you certainly can have a dungeon crawler that ends in boss battlers. Those hybrids do exist. And then the last category is going to be the adventuring. Adventuring is where it's literally about the sense of adventure, and that's where you'll have games that even Arydia, which I mentioned earlier, Arydia kind of has a little bit of dungeon crawling, a little bit of adventuring, but adventuring is more focused on that sense of your character or characters, and you're going on some sort of journey. There's exploration. Maybe you're talking to people. Maybe you're making decisions. Maybe there's choices, but it's less about a pure dungeon crawler where you're exploring a terrain and leveling up your characters. It's less about taking down a single foe, and it's more about literally that spirit of adventure. Things, you mentioned Star Trek. Star Trek is very much the spirit of adventure,
Right,
and you can have that in a tabletop presence as well. And so those are the 3 general umbrella categories I would lump, and then I subdivide those into a little bit of asterisk, which is within adventure games, you'll have within all those 3 genres, there's single shot games and there's campaign games. Because many of these genres tend to lend themselves well to campaign games where you're playing through a linked series of missions, and then sometimes you'll have games that focus purely on the single shot, and then sometimes you'll have games that do both, giving you a campaign experience but offering you the ability to experience it in single shot when you don't want to commit fully.
Yeah, and for me, I think the like all of those categories sound awesome, and I think for me, like the appeal of these, the big umbrella of adventure games is I love the exploration. I love the having my own character and leveling them up as we play. Beyond that, like I've played quite a few, which we'll talk about, because today's episode it's not like usual episodes where we each pick our 5 favorite games. This is more of I'm going to share what I've played and what I haven't played that I'm excited about. And we're going to try to dump them in these buckets, these categories. But also, Alex, since he has a little more intel on other games that might be cool within these umbrellas, he's going to share some recommendations. I guess along with the appeals of these games, like the exploration for me it's super fun. I love flipping something over and seeing like, oh, what did we find? Or making a choice and then it impacts something else.
Yes.
And it could be just a thing where I know like a lot of these games lean in the fantasy world, but I like Lord of the Rings, like I love fantasy adventure movies, and you get that feeling playing some of these games, and you just kind of get so immersed in this world. And I love that about adventure games, but there are definitely some challenges with them. Like some of them, like you said, like a campaign is hard to commit to. You usually have to have the same players, and then it's like coordinating people getting together. These often take up a lot of space, and because some of them have minis and big boxes. And then a lot of them could have, or some of them could have a pretty tough learning curve to kind of get into them. But all that being said, to me, it doesn't stop me from like being thirsty to play more of them and keep playing the ones that I already love.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason this genre is very popular, and people often buy with their eyes as opposed to how much actually playing them. Like people are excited to dive into more of these, and they frequently acquire more, myself included, even if you're not able to table them as much as you want to, because they do offer an experience you don't get from your single shot experiences sometimes, or your non-adventure game experiences. It's something very fun about embodying a character and having that sense of discovery and exploration. There's a itch that's being scratched here.
For sure. And I guess we'll start with boss battlers, but I'll also say Too Many Bones. I just remember seeing Too Many Bones because I was like writing a BGG news post about like, oh, something's coming for this game I've never played. But as I was doing research on it, I was like, this actually sounds pretty cool. And I have very, very little RPG experience. So like it just wasn't attractive to me. And then like the more I researched it, the more I was like, oh, this sounds cool. And then I got it and I was like, this is awesome. But that didn't even funnel me too far down. But just to know where I'm coming from, like I think Too Many Bones was probably like my first adventure kind of game. And then after that, I ended up playing part of Jaws of the Lion, Gloomhaven.
Nice.
Even though I had the giant Gloomhaven original one.
It's easier to table the small one.
Yeah, exactly. So I never got that one tabled. But then when I played Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, I was like, okay, this is great. I like this hand management. This is cool. But for some reason, like it's still just, I was like, I'd rather play Too Many Bones. Because I think because I played Too Many Bones first and I like kind of grouped them similarly in my head, like I never was that gung-ho about finishing Jaws of the Lion. While I can appreciate that it is like an awesome game.
Yeah.
And then I started Frosthaven with friends, and it took forever to play one scenario, and we loved it. And I want to play more of it, but it's just hard to get to the table with different people traveling and just like it's a beast of a game. You're going to be playing for the better part of your day if you're getting that to the table.
Yeah, I mean, and then you have the additional burden of if you do play them infrequently, you have to try to remember exactly how things were and where you left off and what were your character's skills even. Like, there's a challenge to playing these across a drawn-out period.
Yep. So, well, let's get into your first category, boss battlers. And I guess from my list that I put together of games that I either have on my shelf that I'm excited to play or have played, what falls under here, I'll start with Kingdom Death Monster. So I I got a copy of Kingdom Death Monster from a local flea market. Someone was like marked down the price, all the minis were painted, and I was like, this is my chance to try this epic game. So I haven't played it yet. I started like learning it, and I've been really excited to play it, but you know how things go. Life happens, other games happen. But you've played Kingdom Death Monster.
No, I haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
No,
okay.
The theme on that one never pulled me in. And despite the gameplay being supposedly amazing, the way I usually put it is there are so many games that want our attention on a regular basis. And I'm already, no matter what, I'm not going to play all the games I want.
Yeah.
That whenever there's something about a game that doesn't pull me in, I don't try hard to overcome that. I'm comfortable with not overcoming that. There's too many games wanting my attention anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. But Kingdom Death Monster is a boss battler.
Yes.
And I think it was the first that kind of had that.
It arguably is the first. My history is not perfect here, but I do want to say that it's definitely... Because, like, again, boss battles are going to be weird. Like, even Too Many Bones, you could argue Too Many Bones is an adventure combined with a boss battler because lots of little adventures, and then you have that final fight that's often significantly harder. So that's a little bit of a combination. But it's definitely not a pure boss battler. Kingdom Death KDM may well be the first official boss battler. There have been a lot since then. There's Townsfolk Tussle, there's Oathsworn, there's other games, there's Primal, Primal the Awakening. There's a lot of other ones that definitely lean into it either fully or partially, but KDM may well be the original.
Yeah, because it's like the main thing is you're dealing with some boss. Like you're trying to take down this creature, and then there's a part of like kind of building your civilization. And yes, I know it's very dark and it's not for everybody, but as a piece of art, I'm so curious to try it. And the mechanisms seem cool from what I've seen.
Yeah, and the community around is incredibly passionate, incredibly so. Like you don't have that level of passion around something unless there's something there.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I think Oathsworn would kind of fall under the boss battler category. Do you have experience with that one?
Oh, definitely. I got 2 giant boxes above my head over here. There's 4 giant boxes to it, which we don't need to talk about. But Oathsworn, it's definitely a boss battler. There's elements where you could argue that it's a little bit almost, there's definitely an adventure element to it because the game alternates very heavily between a story, a choose your own adventure element before you dive into this map, and then these enemies you're facing off against. Occasionally there are several, so in that sense it's not always pure boss battler, but I would definitely say that the majority of it is a boss that you have to face off against that has its own ways it reacts. It reacts to the board state in general, it reacts to the ways you attack it and slowly take it apart, and so it's definitely a very popular, strong boss battler.
This one I've been really, really excited about. It's funny because I'm pretty sure it was the very first episode of the BGG podcast, Aldi mentioned it as a game he was looking forward to. And at that point, I had no idea about it. I was like, okay, no interest, no idea. And then like years later, it's like, oh, this game looks awesome. So I'm really excited to play that. So probably we'll hear more on my thoughts on it in 2025 when I get it to the table.
Yeah, and it's a very manageable campaign length. It's not too overwhelming. It's definitely going to take some time, but when you look at games like Frosthaven and Gloomhaven, Oathsworn is very manageable in size.
Cool. And then Vagrantsong. Have you played Vagrantsong?
Yes, that's definitely a boss battler.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. That's a good one. Vagrantsong is a good one that's very interesting thematically because you're not actually killing the bosses so much as restoring their humanity, but it's very mechanically interesting because ultimately you're still attacking them, dealing 2 damage, but instead of dealing 2 damage, you're restoring 2 humanity to them.
That's cool.
It plays as if you're killing them, but thematically you're healing them. But there's ghosts. You're kind of a bunch of I don't know if you're ghost hunters officially, but you're wandering along this train, and there's a little bit of choosing an adventure, a little bit of branching path scenarios, a ton of charm, and then these bosses you have to take down.
Yeah. I forget how this one fell on my radar, but I just looked at it, watched a couple of videos, and I was like, oh, this looks cool. So I'm like really excited to play that one. And I'm trying to think if there are any other boss battlers or games that I would consider boss battlers on my list.
Yeah, they're not as common as the other categories. I'd say that when they do land, they often land with a very big impact, but they're definitely a little less so of them.
And then you told me about a game that I've been another boss battler that I'm really curious to try called Primal the Awakening.
Primal the Awakening. We're gonna be one of my recommendations. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not, but definitely gonna be one of my recommendations here, because I find Primal delivers on several fronts. It has delightful hand management if you appreciate card games. It has bosses that are very varied in their approaches and the reactions, and they feel different. It does a good job of giving you both campaign game and single shot. Like the single shot in Primal is actually engaging. Like I recommend people start with the tutorial, but then from there, whether you want to continue the campaign or just build your character around a single shot. Like I've played a bunch of single shot missions, and it's a little bit like you sit there, you build your deck around the scenario you're playing. You can still have that satisfaction of building your character and developing your character, but you're not actually locked into a campaign. So it does an excellent job there. The campaign itself is a very manageable size. Again, it's like 11 missions if I recall correctly. It's not too overbearing, and it plays well solo. I've done it solo. It plays well cooperatively. It's one of the most satisfying campaign games I have, or like boss battles, campaign games, adventure games. One of the most satisfying adventure games I have, and I recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, and I remember like looking into it a little bit after you told me about it. Whenever that was at some convention wherever we
I
met.
think it was Gen Con.
Was it Gen Con? Okay. You were telling me about it, and I watched some videos. I think you have videos on it on your channel, and there's something interesting with the card play in this
Yes.
game too, right?
The card play is very Marvel Champions inspired. I shouldn't say inspired because I don't know if they actually were inspired, but it's similar to Marvel Champions. But in the sense that you have a hand of cards at any given point, and the cards are both the currency and the actions. So when you have your hand of 5 cards, and many things will let you draw more cards, so you often have more decisions you're making. But you're looking at that and you're like, well, I really want to play these 3 cards, but I can combine these 2 cards to pay for those, and also use this, stamina I built up from last turn. And so you have to make decisions around what's going to get played, as well as what's going to get played, but what's going to be utilized to play those cards. So you're just operating with limited ability to do everything you want. And so like even as you sat there and built your entire deck, there's like that trade-off of, okay, great, I know I wanted these cards here, but I can't do it all. I have to pay for everything.
Yeah.
So that's
Cool.
that provides. I find any game that makes me feel the hard decisions I'm making, I appreciate, and I constantly feel that in Primal.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm still very stoked to try that one too. Cool. Well, that's any other boss battlers to
From boss battles, I think my 2 personal recommendations in the boss battler genre, the ones that have done the best for me, are Primal and Oathsworn, which we touched upon both.
Cool. Awesome. Well, let's get into dungeon crawlers then.
There's a lot in that category. Dungeon crawlers is arguably one of the bigger categories here with a lot to go through. But do you want to go over your catalog first, or should I jump into recommendations?
Let's start with my catalog, just because I definitely would say there's a game called Rogue Dungeon that I picked up. I'm pretty sure this one is card based.
Is that not Mini Rogue? Different game?
Different game. It's called Rogue.
Interesting.
Dungeon.
I don't know it offhand. I know Mini Rogue.
It is a print and play game.
I don't know this one.
1 to 3 player cooperative dungeon crawler. It was originally designed for solo, and it's an old school roguelike game. And I think I found this. I think I might have discovered this from the Dungeon Dive channel, but I haven't gotten a chance to play it. Yeah, check it out because I think it was. You might have to get it from like the Game Crafter or something. But okay, so there, I got you one. I got you a recommendation to check out.
I did not know that one.
Yeah, so that is definitely a dungeon crawler. Mini Rogue also. Mini Rogue is really cool because it's a small box. It's mostly card based, but you're delving down into a dungeon and you're exploring and finding cool stuff, finding enemies that you need to overcome and defeat, and eventually getting to I'm trying to remember now. I haven't played
I
it in a
think there's
while.
a final boss in the end. If I recall correctly.
Would you consider Mage Knight, or I know Gloomhaven is
So
technically.
Gloomhaven's definitely a dungeon crawler. This is where you'll get into fights with people on the internet. I've gotten into fights with people on the internet. I'll call a game a dungeon crawler. People are like, why? Why is that a dungeon crawler? But it depends on what you classify them as. I mean, I've sometimes used BGG's own rankings, and they're like, it's still not a dungeon crawler. I'm like, whatever. Anyways, so I think Mage Knight definitely does fall into the dungeon crawler category. It's definitely going to be an adventure game too. I don't think again, there's also overlap here. I don't think all dungeon crawler are adventure games. I don't think all adventure games are dungeon crawlers, but you can certainly find ones that are both. I think Mage Knight would definitely be both in that sense. There's an argument to be made that Too Many Bones is a dungeon crawler. I think I'd classify it more adventure because I think there's a fine line, but like the lack of having any sort of real difference in the terrain you're playing on makes me like just shy back a little bit from dungeon crawler. But again, I wouldn't be offended if someone called it dungeon crawler. I put it more in the adventure because of that. But you mentioned Gloomhaven and Frosthaven; those are definitely dungeon crawlers. There's the entire Zombicide line. There are some people who fight me on this, but Zombicide is, according to BGG's database, is a dungeon crawler.
Okay.
Cthulhu Death May Die. That's going to be again going to my recommendations here. Cthulhu Death May Die is going to be my singular recommendation for the dungeon crawler category as one that
Cthulhu Death May Die.
Yeah, and this one actually, speaking of combining things, this one actually combines dungeon crawler with boss battler, because every game of Cthulhu Death May Die ends in a climactic fight with the elder god that you eventually stumbles onto the scene, and there definitely is that escalation of taking it down. I think that some boss battler fans would probably be offended at the classification, but I think it leans into that category to an extent.
Is Cthulhu Death May Die cooperative or competitive?
It's
or
cooperative.
What's the hook of it?
It's actually interesting because in a lot of these games, most of the games we're talking about today are inherently cooperative. There's one that is actually competitive I'll talk about, but most of these tend to be cooperative. But the hook of Cthulhu Death May Die is you basically are a bunch of... Have you ever played anything in the Arkham universe?
I played the LCG.
Okay, so that would be a great adventure game. I put that in the adventure category.
Okay, well, I love Arkham Horror. Yeah,
it's so I think there's a lot of this. There's Arkham Horror, the board game, Arkham Horror, the card game. There's Eldritch Horror. There's a lot of things. Elder Sign, lots of things out there. Cthulhu Death May Die kind of took that theme and went more into the hack and slash realm as opposed to the investigator realm. Typically, Arkham has been thematically more like, ooh, you got these clues and you piece together that, and combat's kind of in the back end. Cthulhu Death May Die was like, hey, what if we took that theme and instead of like finding these signs to open up the gate and whatever it is, you're like, no, we're just gonna punch Cthulhu in the face. That's the term they used. But the hook is a single shot game, so there's scenarios, but each scenario stands on its own. You can play scenario 12, you can play scenario 1 at any point you want, and you're basically investigators who have unique asymmetric abilities to them, and then you're going to be wandering out onto the board, and the general goal of every scenario is you're trying to interrupt the ritual, because the cultists are trying to bring the elder onto the board, and until you interrupt the ritual, the elder god is undefeatable. He's invulnerable to damage. He may show up on the board eventually and he can hurt you, but you can't hurt him until you interrupt the ritual. And that's where every time you play it, you're combining an elder god and a scenario. So you can play against Yog-Sothoth in scenario 2, you can play against Cthulhu in scenario 3, but you can mix and match however you want, which gives a different flavor because each elder god is very different and each scenario is very different. And so you have the scenario, you have the whatever, so maybe you have to go ahead and destroy the 4 campfires, and that's going to stop the ritual. And every scenario is a different ritual and different board layout. But once you do disrupt the ritual, the elder god gets summoned automatically. You may have thought disrupting the ritual stops the elder god. He's always showing up. But what you do get to do is disrupting the ritual makes him vulnerable. So now he's on the board, but he's vulnerable, and you can actually start dealing damage to him. And that's where you get to like the semi-boss fight realm, because there's always going to be enemies you're fighting against the entire time, but the elder god is the enemy you're trying to defeat. I find it's very cinematic in its gameplay experience. That I would say most games of Cthulhu Death May Die come down to the wire. You can win or lose, but it feels like it could have gone either way. And almost every game, even if you win, some of your characters will die. And it's usually very cinematic the way they do. Like, there'll be someone who goes down in a blaze of guns. They'll be like, that's it, I'm running into the mob, and got my Tommy gun, I'm going to shoot everyone down, I'm going to deal 5 extra wounds to Cthulhu, and you guys can take him out next turn, but this is the move. Because you often have to play it safe to be conservative, but that means you can't do as much damage. And when you're kind of taking out the elder god, it's okay to sacrifice yourself to save the world. But I think that I think you'd enjoy this a lot. It's very cinematic.
I think so too. Like, that sounds awesome. I've heard of this game, and maybe like seen it here and there, but I really have never, again, probably because it was like, oh, that's not for me. But everything you just said sounds super exciting. And I'm like, oh, I got to play this game.
Well,
I got to play this game.
5 hours left to back the current campaign on GameFound.
Wow.
Although if you're listening in the future, late pledges are almost certainly open.
There you go. That's cool. So I was really excited to have this conversation, even though I knew you were going to like put games on my radar, and I have so many games I still need to play that I already have. But, you know, that's part of the excitement of board games, the world of board games.
And my fun fact about this one is this one's actually interesting because this is Simon's slow burn of a game, meaning right now it is currently because Board Geek has rankings and ratings. I believe this is Simon's highest rated game. If you exclude things that have like 2 ratings for an expansion, so it's their highest rated game, and I believe it's their second highest ranked game. But it's actually about to eclipse Blood Rage. But this is one that's interesting because when Clueless May Die came onto the scene, it like was in like the top 1,000 or whatnot pretty quickly. But then after that, it just slowly continued to climb up the ranks. If you use BGG's fun little plug for BGG, if you don't know, there's a little tool where you can see the historical ratings of where a game has been. And if you look at it, it's fascinating how this has been a consistent slow burn up over time. Like something like Blood Rage has actually like shot to the top and then has slowly dropped from like I think it's at a high of 16 at one point, and it's been slowly dropping to like 53. Whereas the Clueless May Die is one that when it first landed, people were like, it's good. But then over time, people appreciated it more and more, and it's consistently been working its way up. It's currently at 56, and I'd say give it a few weeks and it'll probably cross over.
Cool. Oh my gosh. Okay, I want to play that. Have you heard of a game called Iron Helm?
No.
Okay, this is another, I want to say either I discovered this on Dungeon Dive or maybe the Azure Death solo channel. One of those channels put this game on my radar, and it is, I think, solo.
Okay.
And the cool thing, again, this is another card-based one, so, you know, it doesn't take up much space on your shelf. But the cool thing, I played it once, is that when you're exploring, you have a scenario where you're going to have 2 cards and you flip one and you decide, do you want to deal with that? Or do you want to get rid of this? And not knowing what the other card is, you're stuck with like deciding to take that. So it's like, you know, do you go for the unknown or like what you know? And that card decision was really cool. And don't remember much else about this one, but I just remember that I really enjoyed it, and I want to play it more because I picked this one up and Rogue Dungeon around the same time. I also got like Quest for the Lost Pixel. I've heard good things about. I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah, I will say I sometimes indie stuff tends to cross my radar, but definitely one of my sins is I tend to be pulled in by the big box games that everyone knows about. And indie things are a little, again, they definitely will happen. Usually when a creator reaches out to me directly. But yeah.
Cool. Well, speaking of, I guess, a bigger box, Fateforge.
Oh, Fateforge.
Chronicles of Khan.
Yes, that's an upcoming expansion to that one coming as well in crowdfunding soon. That one's one I have not had a chance to play the final game, and I've heard good things about it. I played the prototype when it first came out, and I enjoyed it. Have you had a chance to play this one yet?
Yeah, so I demoed it back in the day and thought it was really cool, and then I played, I think, just like one scenario, and I did it solo. And I was like, this is so cool. I need to play this with Matt. That's another thing I love about adventure games is my partner Matt enjoys them too. So it's like something to get him to the table with me. So I haven't gotten back to it yet, but I think it's super cool. And this is an app-driven game where the app remembers your choices and you kind of alternate between like story time and then combat scenes. But the app tells you how to set it up and like where to put the enemies. And it seems really smooth and clever. And I like that the pitch of it is that you can play just one scenario in like an hour and a half, or you could play multiple in one night and feel like you've, you know, achieved a lot, you've explored a lot, you've done a lot in one night, a weekday night. Like that's super cool and, you know, a lot easier to get to the table than something like Frosthaven.
Yeah, I've heard great things about the final game. I think the combat does benefit from being very unique in the world, which one of the things that's always hard is how do you stand out, and their combat system is definitely unique in the way you have to like kind of it's almost like half puzzle, half combat.
Yes.
And then the story I've heard is very immersive. So it's one of those things that I kind of want to play it a lot because I've heard so many good things, and I also have to balance that with the games on my shelf that aren't getting played.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm there with you. Would you consider that just a more pure adventure?
So, I mean, I consider it more dungeon crawl. Sorry, I would consider it half adventure, half dungeon crawl because,
Okay.
again, dungeon crawl on its own would be almost specifically where it's literally straight up dungeon crawl. There's whole genres of games that we haven't even touched upon that I haven't even played that are just straight up dungeon crawlers. This one definitely has a large adventure component to it, but because again you have that tile aspect, the individual sessions of it do feel very dungeon crawler in their approach. The larger game perhaps is more adventure, but every time you set up the board and have to deal with that puzzly combat, it's a dungeon crawl to an extent.
Yep. Cool. I'm looking at my list. Another game that I'm excited to play that I haven't played yet is Agamonia. I know you have
Oh,
videos on this one.
Agamony is excellent. That's interesting because again, this is where you get to that debate again. There's not dungeon exploration in the typical sense, but I would say that the overall feel of Agamonia drifts more towards adventure. But again, because there's that map, there's interacting, there's wandering around the board, there's enemies closing the distance towards you. I think it does have a dungeon crawler adjacent.
And this one, like what appealed to me most is like the resource system of like how your health is your resource. You know, maybe you could describe it better than me.
So your health kind of becomes your stamina. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. Health is like
Okay.
stamina at the same time. So you're trying to balance utilizing your stamina and or your health at different points. And as you use your stamina, like, again, I'm trying to recall it as well.
Yeah.
It's been like a month or two since my last game. But your health kind of flips over to stamina or vice versa. And so that's the interesting challenge there. To me, the main thing I love about Agmonia is the point of interest interactions. As you're wandering around the board, like you might wander to something that you can see. So like, you go on the board and like you can see there's a person in the corner. You can see there's a fallen tree over there. And as you get close enough you to see things, the game has you putting out a card. So like as you're wandering on the board, you might not realize exactly what it is, but you know that if I step in this space, something 3 spaces away will appear. And then so you step in that space, and then boom, now there's a fallen tree on the road. But the problem is, at the same time that you see the fallen tree on the road, you also see a person in the other direction that's 2 spaces away. And so now you can only interact with those things. You only flip those cards when you get closer. And so now there's like, what do I do? Do I want to go see what's going on with the fallen tree, or do I want to go talk to that person in the corner? And you often have room to do both. The problem is in a whole session, you might have like 40 of these choices and have room to do 30 of them. So you don't have the full room to explore everything most of the time. You have to
Gotcha.
make choices as far as what captures your interest and attention.
Cool. Yeah, I'm stoked to play Agamonia. And for people who are in their cars and can't look it up if they're curious, this one is a big box. Oathsworn is a big box. Again, some of the
Primal's a
stuff.
big box.
Yeah, Primal of the Awakening is a big box. Rogue Dungeon and Iron Helm and Mini Rogue are smaller, where you can kind of get that feel in a smaller package. And I guess along the card-driven path, or thinking of games that are mostly like you don't have a physical map, you're using cards or a card-based map, I'll shout out Call of Kilforth. Have you ever played Call of
Yes.
Kilforth?
No, I haven't. I've heard amazing things about the Kilforth system. I have all 3 of them.
Yeah.
Have not played them.
Haven't gotten them. Okay. I played Call of Kilforth twice. And it was one of those things where we played it one game and then we were like, okay, let's do it again now that we've learned some things. And this is Tristan Hall, All or Nothing Productions. I'm really loving everything that I played that they have put out. But you're exploring this map. It's cooperative. There might be a way to play it competitively, but each person like has their own goals that you kind of need to play through these objectives. So you're both, or however many people you're playing with, exploring this map, trying to complete your goals, but you can't deal with the final challenge or the final boss until you both or all players have completed their objectives. And so it's cool because you're both like uncovering stuff, you're helping each other, but we have our own independent like kind of quests as well. So we enjoyed that quite a bit. And the art from All or Nothing Games is usually like really, really
Amazing.
good.
His stuff's
Yeah.
insane.
So that's a good one. And I guess that would be a little more on the adventure side, maybe.
So from what I've seen of it, I would categorize adventure. But again, I haven't played it. I've seen the general idea of it.
Okay, and then from the same designer and same publishing company, Kreel Manor.
Interesting. So I don't know much about Kreel Manor. I know that game from them.
Yeah.
But I don't know anything about the actual game itself.
Yeah, so have you ever heard of Veilwraith?
Yes, I've played Veilwraith. Yes.
Okay. So this is a prequel to Veilwraith. Veilwraith is this like dark game that's a solo game that has these, your threats are coming in a card row that you're having to deal with them, and you have like skill cards. And for Kreel Manor, now I've only played my first adventure. It's really cool, and it's a real cool like evolution of this system. I'm playing it solo, but I'm curious to see how the co-op will be. Like after I get through my first campaign, I'll play it with Matt, I'm sure. But this game, they changed a few things. So first of all, this is a game that's campaign based, but I don't know, you could really just play a scenario if you wanted to.
Okay.
But they basically, a campaign is 5 adventures. So you're trying to like survive through 5 different adventures. If you play one adventure and you lose, you take a wound and you have to play that adventure again. And basically, once you have like, I think 5 wounds, that's like the end of your campaign. But otherwise, you keep playing and you have this like wound card that's, kind of disabling you a little bit. But the hook of this game to me is, number one, again, it's card based. So it's a normal size box. And for each adventure that you play, you will have like an adventure location card, and then you'll mix in some other combination of other different location cards. So you're kind of like, that's your map world. Like, I'm going into the gates of this castle. So here I am. And then, once I've overcome that, and that to me is like, if you know Arkham Horror, the card game, like where you're putting those little tokens that I can't remember the name of them, clues or whatever, on your objective, and then once you complete it, you flip it over and it has that kind of thing with the way the adventure locations or the locations for your adventure work, where you need to like advance that along, but you also have this onslaught of different types of threats that are flowing into this card row. And one of the differences between Veilwraith and this is they have this shadows area. So like if you've ever played Aliens, the deck building game, Legendary Encounter Aliens, where the enemies spawn face down, this is what happens now. Because in Veilwraith, you just like flip a threat card and here it is, and you deal with it, or another one comes out and they keep growing. But this, you have 3 shadow slots. And similar to, again, Alien deck building, Legendary Encounter Aliens, you can take actions to reveal them before they flow into your threat area. But once it's in your threat area, it's going to eat at your spirit. And your spirit is your health in this game. The other thing is you have a character. And this is one of those games where I could not decide which character I wanted to be. I'm like, I usually play green and I like archers. So there was this character, and each of them have really cool art, and there's a male side and a female side. There's a bard that you can get as an extra character, which I backed this on Kickstarter. So they're like, the characters, the art is fantastic. There's a bit more, you didn't have a character in Veilwraith, but this, you have a character board where you can like add different assets and have special skills that you get throughout the game. But the main action system of this game is very similar to Civilization: A New Dawn and what Ark Nova borrowed from that, where you have 3 main actions in slots of strength, 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's still that. And it's like when you use an action, you can only use one action on your turn. You exhaust it and you push it to the front of the queue and everything slides to the right. There are lots of different ways, like cool skills where you can like level up the strength of these actions. They have this tilt option where you can tilt and again power up the action so you can take down enemies. There are a lot of plot cards in this. So like when you defeat the plot card, you get to go read a passage and there's like a story. And at the end of my first adventure, I had 3 choices of where I go next. And so that was really fun. And I'm excited to see how my second adventure is going to be, because for each adventure you play, you'll have an adventure card that tells you put in these types of threat cards and these foes, and then you build this deck, and then you just got to get through it. You got to like overcome all the plots and foes and then explore the final location. It's really good. I think if you're into solo games, whether into adventure games or not, I think it's a really cool system. And Veilwraith is still super cool, but like this is new and improved Veilwraith.
I mean, even just how excited you are about this version of it makes me intrigued.
Yeah, it's you're gonna like it. If you liked Veilwraith, you're gonna really like Kreel Manor.
Cool.
Do you have a recommendation in this category?
Well, so we kind of were dancing through a list, because in the category of dungeon crawlers, I had one recommendation, which was Let Me Die. I mean, I have many, but if I'm trying to restrict it to 5 recommendations,
that's right.
Yeah, I chose 2
That's
boss
right.
battlers, 1 dungeon crawler, and 2 adventure games. Again, with overlap in some areas.
Cool. I guess, we'll keep going through my list a little bit. Thorgal
I haven't played, so I think from what I know of it, I would say it's adventure.
Yeah, this one is scenario based, so not a campaign. And you have a scenario booklet, and it has, I think, 8 different scenarios you can play. And the neat thing, I might have talked about this before, but the neat thing about it is the exploration and also how your character tracks their health is with these polyomino tiles, which is like kind of neat. This is a normal size box. Have not played it yet. It's on my list. I read the rules, punched it, so I'm excited to play that. And yeah, I don't know exactly where it falls, but it's one-shot games that have different scenarios.
It looked intriguing.
Have you played Dragons Down?
No, I haven't.
Have you heard of this one?
No.
Okay, I hadn't either until I went to PAX Unplugged, and Aldi messaged me and was like, hey, you should check out this game while you're there. And I go over to the booth and I'm like, oh, this sounds cool. And then I start talking to them more and more, and they sent me home with a copy. And I'm really pumped to play it because the designer who made this game is hugely inspired and passionate about Magic Realm. And Magic Realm is like one of those games that I've never gotten the chance to play yet. And it's very hard to acquire, but I think it's something I would really enjoy. So I think Dragons Down kind of takes that. And I would say this is probably more adventure, and distills it into a much shorter package. Because I think Magic Realm, I don't know if you've ever played it.
No, it's before my time.
Yeah, same. And it's like, it's supposed to like be a whole day exploration thing. I don't know. I've been curious about it, and I would like to try it at some point. It's like that and like Republic of Rome, certain big old games like that I'm curious about. But anyway, I'm excited about Dragons Down. It seems super cool. There are people who have videos out there so far for it. You might like that one.
Intrigued, and I have to look into it.
What about, I mean, there are so many. Have you ever played, let's go into some of the different ones.
Adventure games?
Yeah, and I see it on your shelf. Let's talk about Unsettled, because a lot of these games are fantasy themed.
Or even combat.
Yeah, and Unsettled is like a sci-fi survival game.
Yeah, the Unsettled, the only reason Unsettled is not in one of my recommendations is because I already know you're excited about it and have played it. That's the only reason it's not. Otherwise, it would be. Because if I was trying to give people, like, when I try to think of my recommendations, what I was trying to think through is a combination of what you don't already know and love, but then also trying to dance a little bit into different categories. So we haven't touched upon it yet, but I even have one competitive because it's actually kind of hard to find in the genre. But Unsettled is amazing. It's incredible. It's one of the things that really stands out about it for me is the fact that it's sci-fi, which already puts it in the minority, not exclusively, but minority. It's a lack of combat, which puts it very much in the minority. This is about solving problems and engaging the world around you, but it's not really combat-based. Even when there's threats against you, like, you kind of have to figure out your own way around them. It's more science-based. It's one shot, which makes it easy to pick up and play. It comes in all small little boxes for these different planets, so you can expand it without feeling that you're committing to hundreds of hours of gameplay. This is definitely... This would easily be in my recommendations if you didn't already love it.
Yes, yeah. I've only played Planet 1 twice with the same, a different like scenarios on Planet 1, And it was like, wow, there's so much replay value just with one planet. I ended up buying more. I really, really love it. And their like production is
Insane.
really, really cool. And then I guess another one I'll mention for a weird, or not weird, but like less common category, something I'm just getting into, is a new game from Phalanx called Purple Haze. Purple
nice.
Haze,
I know, but I haven't played it.
It's so this is like, I like war games and historical games also, and this is a Vietnam War story creation game where you are, and this one is not for kids unless you don't care about your kids reading curse words, and it's you're a squad in Vietnam, in the Vietnam War, and you're having these challenges, but you're moving around a board, then you're doing some battles, having encounters. And it's really, really cool. I don't know of another like historical game that is doing something like that. So this seems like it's like one of the first.
Very cool. So recommendation wise, there's a few here that, and there's some very intrigued as to whether I'm curious as to whether the competitive one would work for you. But one of my favorites, something we haven't talked about in the adventure game category, is there's a bunch of there's older games like Runebound or Rune Wars. I don't know if you've played any of those.
No, I've heard of them.
They're worth exploring if you're going into a deep dive in this category. But the one that for me is the recent one that I love is The Witcher Old World. The Witcher Old World from Go On Board is a competitive adventure game that there is a cooperative version. So if you like the game but want to play cooperatively, there's like one of the expansions adds a co-op or solo mode, I believe. But the basic game has you controlling a Witcher from the IP, the books, and all that stuff. You're controlling a Witcher, and you're wandering around the universe trying to level up, and you are fighting various monsters in the universe. You're hunting monsters, but you can also attack other Witchers. You can hunt other Witchers. So there's a competitive aspect where you're trying to get 4 trophies. You get trophies from fighting monsters. You get trophies from fighting other Witchers. You get trophies from getting to the top of certain tracks as you power up your character, and you're trying to be the first one there. So it's, again, because it hits that competitive aspect while feeling very much adventure-y, I want to include that, and also because I like it so much. So that was definitely on my list.
Well, that's a good one too to suggest, because no, I haven't played it, don't know much about it, and Matt played the Witcher video game, so that will be one to like get him to the table with me.
For sure, if you have that IP aspect. The one thing I would caution to both yourself, Matt, anyone listening, is I think The Witcher as it stands is already an excellent game, but I do think that like a common complaint against the base game, which I think is fair, I still love the game, but it's a good complaint, is that the monsters don't feel varied enough. The monsters feel like, oh, there's like all these monsters, but each one has like this tiny little rule, and outside of that, it's just like they're the same monster again and again and again. And that's mostly true. The caveat I'd give there is the expansions, I think, there's a lot of expansions that do different things for the game that fill out weak spots very nicely, and one of the expansions very much adds to the monster nuance so that every monster really does have its own little feel to it. But again, I think the game is good on its own. I think you should never need an expansion to fix a game, but if you play the game but want a little more, there's a little more.
Gotcha.
The other one I'd go with is one I mentioned at the beginning, Arydia, The Path We Dare Tread. I think that this one really encapsulates a full RPG-like experience. So many of these games are kind of leaning into specific things they do, and if you're looking for something that feels more like a full-on adventure with combat and interaction and the overworld map and all of that, Arydia is one that you should definitely check out.
And Dungeon Degenerates, which I have learned, set up. Yeah, it's got this very psychedelic art. I've only dabbled in it. I'm really excited to play it. Maybe over the holidays, I will get that one to the table. Fallen Land, second edition. That's like a post-apocalyptic, and this one is competitive. But it's like you have lots of different characters, and you're managing like your kind of gang of people, and you're trying to complete certain objectives. That's a big box. And another one I need to get to the table, Earthborne Rangers.
It's supposed to be incredible. I have not played it yet. Yeah.
Same.
But you mentioned you like Arkham Horror. It's from the same studio behind that.
Exactly.
Well, studio should be clear. Same team behind that.
Yeah, that's right. Because they broke off. That's right. Yep. And then Seventh Citadel is also in my queue.
I mean, you're going to have a very difficult next few years ahead of you, because these... I can keep going with the amount of games. Isis Vanguard, S.T.A.L.K.E.R, just looking around my shelves over here, Massive Darkness, there's so many incredible experiences. Tenaris Adventures, we didn't even talk about that. It's a whole world. There's so many incredible board game experiences that fall into the adventure game category. And the tricky part is many of them by default are big box experiences.
That takes time to get through. Yeah.
It's very easy to add to the list faster than you're going through it.
Yeah, I'm excited to play a lot of these. And the last one I guess I'll mention that I'm excited about that's a little different is Paupers Ladder. And this
Paupers
is,
Ladder, I don't know that.
yeah, a lot of people don't know this one, but it fell on my radar. And when I saw it, the art is so charming and it's unique. And I've played it once at 2 players and we had a great time. Like it's competitive and you're trying to, you're exploring these different areas and trying to, beat everybody else to completing whatever your objective is. But it has like such a unique look and feel, and
Fascinating.
it's very charming and like lighthearted. And I'm really excited because there's a second edition. I should be getting it soon, and I haven't tried any of the expansions, and I want to try it solo. But that's another one that fell on my radar that I'm very excited about. And then I see also on your shelf Tamashii Chronicle of Ascend.
Yep.
That's when we get into like more cyberpunk world. I'm pumped to play that one.
Check out Rise of Moloch is phenomenal. That's another competitive one.
Okay, I haven't heard of that.
Have you ever played Star Wars Imperial Assault?
Yes.
So it has that feel to it as far as how the game plays. It's kind of dungeon crawler, but against somebody else, so to speak.
Wow, cool. And then you have like I have a copy of Lands of Galzyr, which is I think
fun.
lighter, more story driven kind of.
That one's to me more experiential. I enjoyed it. There's you're kind of developing the world every session, and then it keeps changing up. But it's definitely very unique.
I'm planning on hopefully on Christmas Eve. I'm going to try Tales of the Arthurian Knights. I've never played.
Oh, it's out already. Yeah, from WizKids.
Yeah, it came out, and I've never played the
Tales of the
predecessor.
Arabian Nights.
Yeah, Tales of the Arabian Nights. But yeah. Steph Hodge was saying they're loving it, so I'm excited to play that.
Interesting.
I did not give Chip Theory's Elder Scrolls a shout, but
it's
that
excellent.
game is so good. I mean, yeah.
Everything in their catalog, but
exactly.
They have Burn Cycle. They're all these are adventure game adjacent to an extent.
Yes. And then I saw something on my long list here.
I'll try 20 Strong because we've been going with a mix of big and small boxes. 20 Strong is solo friendly and definitely more affordable, both in terms of game time, shelf space, actual cost.
Yes, that's a great recommendation. And it's really a fantastic system. Shadows of Malice.
Is that also from, what's it called?
Devious Weasel.
No, I don't know.
From
Interesting.
Jenna Feli, who designed Cosmic Frog. Shadows of Malice is an older game.
Is that the one with the box is black? It's like a white circle? Because I know the box. I don't know the game.
So this game, and it's really funny because as I this summer got back into this adventure game mindset, I bought this game a while ago just because I was like, oh, Cosmic Frog, I like all these weird games that Devious Weasel puts out. But so this was a pleasant surprise to then get excited about it and find out I already own it. But this is a more abstract experience and it's really unique and I can't wait to dig into it. Like I made custom dice for it. I've got player aids. I got everything ready. I just need to play it. But that's another one I'm really excited about. And it feels, again, different than anything else we've talked about. So had to give that a shout.
Beautiful.
Anything else, Alex?
I don't know. I think I mentioned S.T.A.L.K.E.R already. That's a great one. It's Slay the Spire if you want to lean into the video game genre. Slay the Spire, the board game, is an excellent one that I've been appreciating. It's I think that's if you haven't played the video game, you should play the video game too. But the board game's excellent.
That's what I hear. Everybody's been saying that Slay the Spire board game is really good.
Robinson Crusoe if you're looking for a survival. That's going to be adventure to a degree, again, the build up, different kind of experience.
Well, I think that, obviously we've talked about a lot of games here, and each one of these games could be a whole day conversation to kind of dig into. But this is just getting our beaks wet here, it's getting me more excited to play the games that I have. It's getting me excited to check out some other games that Alex told me about that I wasn't super familiar with or didn't even know about. But yeah, Alex, I'm so glad we got to talk and do this. And then I finally met you. I guess it was it this year or last year?
I've known your stuff for who knows how long.
Yeah,
but I think we only interacted in person at Gen Con for the first time.
Oh, wow. That's so wild. But yeah, I've been watching your channel a lot and I really appreciate what you do and the games you're covering. And yeah, it was just great to talk to you. Hopefully we'll bump into each other in 2025.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Ken. This has been absolutely fun. I walked with a few that I have to look into as well, both dungeon crawlers as well as that React. But yeah.
Sweet. You've been listening to the Board Game Geek podcast, produced and edited by Candace Harris. Special thanks to Matt Fonda for editing and mixing our music. Be sure to visit us on the web at BoardGameGeek.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch under Board Game Geek. You can reach us by email at podcast@BoardGameGeek.com. Thanks for listening and happy gaming!